The fella isn't dead at all? What was that nonsense he was saying though? I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Was ist eine Soliloquy? Ja, ich würde sagen, Fall ist dann over, ne? Wenn er noch lebt. Selbstgespräch, okay. Shakespeare. So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment. And Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime, whatever that now was. Damn. 21st February, Briar Road. Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsuma. Arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shakespeare did consume poison as we deduce. But was it an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? He looks like he's trying to see into Soseki-san's lodgings. Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Excuse me, could we have a word? Ah! He just ran off. I feel sure that I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? Im 4. Fall, wo wir auch den Shakespeare schon gesehen haben. I do too, but I don't remember. Das ist sehr interessant, dass sie das im ersten Spiel quasi schon aufgebaut haben, diesen Fall. Finde ich sehr interesting. Okay. Wir können uns hier nochmal umgucken, denke ich mal. The Garudep household and Mr. Natsume's lodgings are in a prominent position here on the corner. Sometimes when I look at the building, I can't help feeling that it's a bit of a slant. It does rather look as though it would collapse in even the smallest earthquake, doesn't it? And isn't it supposed to be haunted as well? I think I might have a hunch as to why Soseki-san has such a hunchback. Das Fahrrad, was Soseki gehört, glaube ich. There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Garudep residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped though, especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. Haben wir ja in der einen Eskapade erfahren, dass das Fahrrad von Soseki ist. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear, I fear you may be right. Oh Mann. So, here's Soap, oder? With the exception of the top floor where Mr. and Miss Garudep live, all the windows are bricked up. Wait, ist Miss Garudep da auch noch? Muss sie nicht im Gefängnis sein? Wegen fahrlässiger Körperverletzung? Yes, that's because of an old window tax that was charged on the number of windows a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of the windows. But the tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? So the window could all be opened up again, surely. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have the work done. Yes, that is a sad state of affairs. Especially for people like poor Mr. Natsume, who have to live all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. Okay. Da oben war der Gary-Haushalt. Hier hinten haben wir die Skyline. Ist das jetzt sogar die St. Paul's Cathedral? Kann es sein? London's blanketed in fog again, and the sky is covered in cloud. But if you look carefully in the distance, you can just make out the Crystal Tower being built. Ah, the Crystal Tower, yes. The centerpiece of the Great Exhibition that's to open in 6 months' time. Everyone's talking about the Great Exhibition of London at the moment, it seems. Well, it's to be the largest event of its kind anywhere in the world, with technology and scientists from all over. I can't wait for it myself. Do you think visiting students from the Far East like us will be granted entry? The last great exhibition that was held in London had more than 6 million visitors, it seems. And this time, the British are determined to make it an even bigger success to outdo the Paris exposition. I see. That is an incredible number of people. And with so many people expected to attend, we should easily be able to slip in unnoticed. Warum sollten die Japaner auch nicht reinkommen? Ich meine, haben wir nicht erst ein Bündnis mit den Engländern geschlossen? Also wir nicht, ne? Nicht wir Deutschen, aber die Japaner. There's always the honest approach of buying tickets at the main entrance, Mr. Naruhodo. Das stimmt wiederum auch. Ja, was haben wir hier noch? Ein Schneemann. Why has somebody built a snowman on some sort of pedestal, do you think? That's not a pedestal, Mr. Naruhodo. That's part of the snowman's body. Oh really? But it already has a perfectly good body. Well, it's true that British snowmen are usually made with 2 balls of snow. Perhaps this is a foreigner. And now we are looking at him as if he is strange. Poor man, I know how he feels. If anything, it's Japanese and British 2-ball snowmen that are the strange one. Wir fangen nochmal von vorne an, diesen Satz. If anything, it's Japanese and British 2-ball snowmen that are the strange ones, isn't it? After all, real people do have 3 sections: head, torso and legs. Do you ever think that perhaps you think about things too much? Maybe, aber das macht zu Status Charme auch aus. Eine sehr intelligente jüngere Dame. Jüngere Dame, das hört sich komisch an, junge Dame. Okay. Ansonsten gibt's hier noch was? Nein. Scheinbar nicht. Okay. A new location has been added. Miss Green Hospital's Bed hatten wir schon. Shome Suite in der Rollos-Liga Consultancy. Wir sind jetzt on Briar Road, the scene of the stabbing of Miss Olive Green. It's a fairly wide street that easily accommodates carriages lined on both sides by tall brick townhouses. The Garrideb's room, the suite on the top floor of the house where Mr. Natsume has his lodgings, occupied by the landlord, Mr. Garrideb, and his wife. The window looks out over Briar Road below. Okay, und bin ich da wieder. Und prison, the prison cell where the defendant Mr. Soseki Natsume is being held. He's spending so much time in it, he'll have to start calling the place home soon. Damn, Ryunosuke knows no chill. Naruhodo's Legal Consultancy. My lodgings and office located in the attic above the suite of rooms rented by Mr. Shomes. I call it a consultancy, but clients aren't exactly beating down the door. Shomes Suites, the home and office of the world-famous great detective and his young companion, Iris. It seems people from all over the globe come to engage his consulting detective services. Miss Green's hospital bed, the hospital bed in Bath that's occupied by Miss Olive Green, who sustained a serious injury during the incident on Briar Road. Okay. Okay, Briar Road. Mr. Shamspeare's room, the scene of the crime on the ground floor beneath Mr. Natsuma's room, where the victim Mr. Shamspere lives. The brightly colored outfits and makeshift stage look very incongruous. Und Briar Road, da sind wir gerade. The scene of the step. Okay, das haben wir schon vorgelesen. Ich würde dann sagen, wir besuchen erstmal Mr. Garrideb, ne? »21st February, the Garrideb's room. Here we are again, the eccentric landlord's eccentric top-floor abode. We are here because Mr. Garrideb's the one who discovered the incident this morning, don't forget. Ah, you chaps, eh? Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday. It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Garrideb as anyone, really. Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning. I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garrideb. Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about the dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room. Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Okay, dann konversen wir mal. This morning's incident. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what had happened. Ah, well, that hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. Um 5:30 Uhr. Stell dir mal vor, um 5:30 Uhr aufzustehen. Das kommt vielleicht irgendwann nochmal auf mich zu, aber trotzdem. Um 5:30 Uhr. Und dann steht er um 5 auf. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no bally answer. And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door. Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course. Wasn't a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning. Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that. Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden? Except it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door. Mr. Shamspere. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspere, I believe. Isn't that right? Yes, William Shamspere. Took the ground floor from 3 months ago now. And how would you describe him? In a word, destitute. Was heißt destitute? Destitute. Mittellos, okay. Destitute? Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is a cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or has a bally screw loose. So hard to choose which category Suseki-san would fall into. Vielleicht beides? Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude. He was doing research as well. Research? Into what? Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old Bard myself, you know? Romeo and Hamlet and all that. Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room actually, weren't there? Zao haben wir doch auch schon gehört in der Eskapade mit Soseki, wo wir Japanisch gelernt haben, so ein bisschen. Witzig, dass das alles irgendwie zurückkommt. Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shakespeare would have had much in common. Shakespeare interpretation dire disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo! Really? How rude! Yesterday's events. After Mr. Natsume's trials with yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning? Well, now, must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time. Mr. Garrett noticed there was no light from that room or something, I suppose. Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shakespeare got back, and the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I have you know. Ja, ist das dann nicht klar, dass er dann länger schläft, wenn er bis 1 Uhr nachts wach bleibt? Hätte ich auch keine Lust, um 5 schon wieder aufzustehen nach 4 Stunden. Und was ist das für ein Vermieter, der alles weiß? Na gut, damals vielleicht üblich, ne, aber... Suppose he met his aunt sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark here. Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Is everything alright, Miss Susato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Garrett, you were up here in your room all evening, if I've understood correctly. Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg. Then, how is that you seem to know? The precise movements of your tenant on the ground floor, I mean. That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it? I say, I know what you're thinking. It is a bally outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I? Then how did you know, Mr. Garuda? It's the gas, woman. The gas tells me everything. The gas? Speaking gas? Nee, wahrscheinlich, weil er bezahlen muss, ne? Und er dann mitkriegt, wer wann Gas bezahlt. What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything? Well, as you are probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes. Yes, I'd more or less worked it out. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas machine outside, to the gas main outside. And the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too. Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen? Well, obviously the room would get brighter. Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment. What? They dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual. And that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. Okay, also es flackert dann ganz kurz. Würde Sinn ergeben. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily. Mightn't it? Yes, of course. Because everything is connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen though? It sounds rather undesirable. Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out, and barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposites also true, of course, extinguishing the lamps up here and they glow brighter in the rest of the house. Ah, right, I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it. Oh, of course, because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, what they are guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amount of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. Das ist schon irgendwie praktisch, interessant. Ich weiß nicht, was das richtige Adjektiv dafür ist, aber es ist funny. That's fascinating, Mr. Goldep. Absolutely fascinating. Oh well, nothing to it really. And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Goldep is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again. A good idea. Okay, then let's go to prison. Prison. I don't believe we visited this place for some time. Naja, 4 Tage, ne? 21st February, local prison, cell 9. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now? Locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Oh, yes? What is he? Tell me. Is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me? Let me guess. You're talking about Mr. Sholmes. He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost. But it's diabolic deductions. They are not of this world. They've left me... Aha! Cursed! I'm cursed, I tell you! Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction too. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh! The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you would only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume? It's terrible! Oh. I'm stuck in the cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick. You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're a killer. Why the moustache? Constant questions! I'm sorry to hear that. Ah, that selfish shyster! Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you were going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy William. Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shamspeare was never actually dead in the first place. Ah, yes, that might make sense. And I'm pleased that he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last. Oh! Oops! Miss Natsume? Does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shamspeare, didn't you? I'm not saying another word. I demand to have a lawyer present. Who do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? Converse. What happened? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell. But, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. The case that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her bag. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my very way back to my lowly lodgings, and that evening at Past 9, it must have been. I visited Mr. Shakespeare. So, you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong! I'd never been to his room before. It was the first time. Then, what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties in with what Mr. Garrett said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again later that evening, at around 9 or just after, when I took him some nice tea I brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Mr. Shakespeare, were you? Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet. Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. I'm sure. Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare. And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea. No! Never! Not at all! Team Juliet won. That was me. And when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit. I swear it. Categorically. Was war flamboyant nochmal? Flamboyant. Extravagant. Damn. Cursed existence. Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time I've learned that it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me, they all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse, but even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. Recluse? Einsiedler, okay, habe ich mir schon gedacht. Und Respite? Aufschieben. Okay. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago, I've moved into Briar World. But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. But was 1 week ago erst? Okay. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me. The rent. Obviously, there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed. Cursed? Cursed how? The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no! He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning. Wave? Or blinkert? Was heißt blinkert? Also Wave ist ja mutig, ne? Und blinkert? Engstirnig, okay. But after I moved in, I soon came to realize that what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room history really was. Gosh, was it really so awful? Horrible history. How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes burrowing into my back, watching me. Do you think that might just have been your mind playing tricks on you? No, my mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to the place. A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean? all the souls who've died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me. That really is horrible. Vielleicht sind es aber auch einfach nur Schlafparalyse, Halluzination. And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shamsby was writhing in agony from the poisonous body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room. You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible. Yes, you're right, I know it, and that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home. I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become a history. Phew, Susato-san knows how to make the man listen. Of course. Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse on my room as well. You mean Mr. Garrodep? Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again. Well, that's true. I for one wouldn't go near the place. Ah, perhaps that may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps and his tenants' movements. You mean, because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his latrines. What do you mean, he pays so much attention to the gas lamps? Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please forget I said anything. Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well. What's important is that Mr. Shamsby isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come around and he's able to tell us what happened, we'll be able to get you released. Yes, please. Oh, I do hope you're right. Ahem. Excuse me? Ah, okay. Inspector Gregson! I couldn't help overhearing what you just said, and on that note, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh. Which do you want to hear first? Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. Warum fragt dann überhaupt? Then why did you ask me my preference? As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shamsby, was just unconscious. He's come round now. Yes, we saw it happen in all its terrifying glory. He's still being treated by the doctors, but we've managed to get a written statement from him already. Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume? Oh, thank goodness. It's all over then. I can leave this somber cell. Jetzt kommen die schlechten Nachrichten. Sorry, no, that's not on the cards. What? Why ever not, Inspector? Mr. Shamsby has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night. Implicated someone? Oh dear. You don't mean... I'm sorry to say I do, yes. He's pointing the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Aha! By sweet poison that he seeketh to end my life. That wicked caitiff, Suseki Natsume. Was ist caitiff? Aber das war doch klar, dass das passiert. Das war doch so klar. Schuft. Caitiff ist Schuft, okay. No! So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make me the necessary preparations. No! And so, once again, Suseki-san found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted, or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court, and do my utmost to break the curse that bleiteten. To be continued? Bitte, ich möchte eine Pause machen. To be continued. Ja, nice. Okay. Interesting. Interessanter Fall bisher, dass Soseki wieder angeklagt ist. Und auch eine Parallele zu seinem ersten Fall, dass das Opfer nicht wirklich tot ist, dass das Opfer noch lebt. Das war ja auch, ich glaube, es war das erste Mal in Ace Attorney beim letzten Fall, wo Soseki angeklagt wurde, dass das Opfer überlebt hat. Tatsächlich, dass es kein Mordfall war. Und hier jetzt scheinbar auch. Also interessant, dass es da diese Parallele gibt und dass das jetzt schon zweimal innerhalb kürzester Zeit bei Ace Attorney passiert ist, was sonst nie passiert ist. Und ja, ich bin mal gespannt, wie es ausgeht. Also klar, wir müssen Natsume freisprechen, weil er war ja schon wieder in Japan. Wieso sage ich immer Japan? Wegen Japan, aber es heißt ja Japan, so auf Deutsch. In Japan sage ich einfach. Aber ja, interesting. Und ich finde es auch interesting, dass wir sowohl den Sham-Spear als auch diesen Dude, der gerade weggelaufen ist, schon in diesem 4. Fall von dem ersten Spiel gesehen haben, von Adventures. Finde ich sehr interessant. Ja, okay. Aber soll es dann auch gewesen sein? Als ob Trial Part 1. Dann gehen wir nächstes Mal schon direkt ins Gericht. Okay. Okay, dann gehen wir wohl ins Gericht, I guess. Das soll es erstmal gewesen sein von dieser Aufnahmesession. Wir sehen uns morgen 18 Uhr wieder. Und ja, ich bedanke mich fürs Zuschauen, ich bedanke mich fürs Dabeisein. Und ich bin mal sehr gespannt, wie wir Soseki diesmal freisprechen können. Genau. In dem Sinne, bedanke mich fürs Zuschauen, bedanke mich fürs Dabeisein. Und wir sehen uns beim nächsten Mal wieder. Ciao, ciao und Einspruch. Bis dann. Ciao, ciao. Tschüss.